Okay, we're going to look at Show Don't Tell Volume 2. This one is Storytelling and Video Technique. Let's talk about storytelling first. We're going to talk about a very simple way to think about stories, and that is as a character-driven dramatic narrative. What is that? So you start with the character. What's their action? Action is another way of saying what do they want. It's not necessarily what do they do, but it's saying what do they want to do and what drives them to do the things that they do. That's an action. The action then comes in conflict. There's something outside themselves that they can't get over. And the culmination of that action and conflict you can describe as an event or a climax. So it's the outcome of their action versus their conflict. Another way to look at that, if we're talking about user-centered design, is to say that the need is what the user experiences. What's the depth of the need that they have? The insight is sort of what's the gap between what they need to do and what they want to do, and why aren't they doing what they want to do? That's your insight. And then your design solution is sort of the culmination of the need and the insight. It's kind of the heroic story where your solution solves the problem of the need versus the conflict. How do you get there? So one thing to think about is preparing to shoot. You can think about storyboarding. So very simple technique. The idea is to draw pictures of what you want the action to be, and then use text to describe what you want the audio to be, what do you want them to be saying, and or is there a description of what this scene is about. So I like to use Post-it notes. Just do a little sketch on a Post-it note of the scene, maybe a little caption on another Post-it note, then you can move these around. Let's look at video technique very quickly. Some super simple framing concepts. These are kind of tricks of the trade. You can think of them as very easy tricks to do. They don't necessarily work in every situation, but it's a good bias to have. First of all, the rule of thirds. That picture on the left describes that. The basic idea here is that you divide the frame mentally into thirds, and you put horizon lines and verticals right on the lines of those thirds. And then at the places where there are intersections of the thirds that you've divided in your mind, you can refer to the slide to see this, you use those to put focal points like people's eyes or the object in the frame that you're trying to isolate. Another thing is you can think of framing as having three basic components: a wide shot, a medium shot, and a close-up. And as you get going, as you get started, a good idea is to kind of bias toward not necessarily close-ups, but framing the subject with very little headroom. So you can see the picture on the right where the subject is framed right, in fact the top of his head is cropped. So think of zooming into the subject. This will just help focus your viewer's attention on what you're shooting. Lighting's another important thing. We're not going to be using lights in this class, but one thing to think about is where the light is coming from. Where's the light source in the subject that you're shooting? And you can think of it in two ways here. One is backlighting, the one on the left. That's very good at isolating silhouettes. It's sort of, you can see action because you can see full bodies. Another is to front light, and that gives you a little bit more detail on faces and shows detail of outfits and colors more. So just think about where the light source is relative to your camera, because it may distract your audience if you're not conscious of that. Also coverage. The idea of coverage is to shoot more than you think you'll need, and then that way in editing you can pick what you want. So coverage you can think of as covering your ass. Just get a lot of shots that you can use to make sure that you're covered when you edit. All right, the last thing to keep in mind is audio, and there's a very basic thing you want to do here. I'm going to back up a little bit. So you want to keep the microphone close to your subject. Why do you want to keep the microphone close to your subject? It's just so that you can hear very easily. And this is very important. Sometimes audio is more important than the video itself. So you guys will be using camera mics most likely. Try to get the camera in close to your subject. It does make a big difference. As you can see, the further back I go, the harder it is to hear me. And also, you have to think, though, this is sort of the flip side of it, you have to think about how distracting you're being to your subject. So you don't want to shove the camera right in their face, but you do want to get it as close as possible. One thing to do is to have the camera low, so it's not between you and the subject, but close. It creates a little bit of a low angle, which is Can be an interesting framing, can also be unflattering depending on the person, but you can get the microphone in close without distracting the person you're talking to with the camera. Alrighty, that's it.